During the course of the year, we're going to talk a lot about the advanced placement exam. So this is just the trailer, okay? I'm going to start with a confession. You and your classmates are going to be guinea pigs. This is the first year of a completely revamped AP Art History exam. The College Board is now requiring students to know and teachers to teach a fixed set of images. The College Board is also changing the kind of multiple choice questions it asks. The new questions will be less purely factual, more analytical and comparative. Finally, the College Board is asking students to give a whole lot more information in essays without, frankly, giving students a whole lot more time to write them. Just realize everybody in the country is in the same boat. We're all scrambling to figure out the new rules. My guess, or at least my hope, is that the College Board and the AP exam graders will cut us a little slack this first year. Ms. Jacobs and I are hoping that you will cut us a little slack as well. Here's a quick overview of the structure of the revamped AP test. Half of your score will be determined by 80 multiple choice questions. 35 of these will be more or less standalone questions. 45 will come in sets, usually associated with an image or group of images. As I just mentioned, the College Board is trying to move away from purely factual recall toward more analytical and comparative questions, which means that reading and interpreting the questions is going to be more challenging. On the other hand, you'll get fewer questions. Last year, students had to answer 115 questions in an hour. Also, the works that the questions will cover are now a lot more predictable, thanks to the 250 required images. So, just what are these questions going to look like? I really wish I could give you a more concrete answer to that question. In the past, we've been able to draw on a large test bank of previous AP questions. Now, we have just a relatively small set of sample questions that have been released by the College Board. So let's look at a few of these sample questions from their course curriculum overview to get a sense of the kind of questions you will see in May. So here's an example of a standalone multiple choice question. You should recognize the artist and the work from the first day of class. That's one of the images of Judith slaying Holofernes painted by Artemisia Gentileschi. As it happens, this is not one of the 250 College Board required images, which shows you that it will not only be required images that are used when the question is comparative. Artemisia Gentileschi's works actually don't even show up on the list, which ticked off a lot of AP art history teachers, myself included, but this question should also give you an idea of why Ms. Jacobs and I are requiring works beyond the anointed 250. If you saw this question on the test, you'd think, aha, I know this work. By May, you will also know a lot more about Caravaggio. In fact, last year's class suggested when we asked them at the end of the year what we should do differently, that maybe I should lighten up a little on Caravaggio. I probably will not take that advice. Even today, the second day of class, you should know something about this painting and you should know something about Caravaggio. Before you toss out what you think is the right answer, and you probably are right, I want you to stop and notice that simply to understand the question, you need to be familiar with a whole lot of art history vocabulary. Don't worry, you're going to learn a whole lot of art history vocabulary in this course. So to start out with, what is a monochromatic palette? Mono means one, right? Chromatic refers to color. So this means a color scheme that is largely based on a single color. Here's an example of a mostly monochromatic palette from a self-portrait by Vincent van Gogh. The painting consists largely of different shades of blue, although that orange beard does stand out in striking contrast. Stay tuned for our discussion of complementary colors. Here's an example of Tena Prism, which according to the Visual Arts Encyclopedia is, quote, a style of painting characterized by deep shadows and a distinct contrast between light and dark areas. Here's a famous example of a pyramidal composition, Leonardo da Vinci's Virgin of the Rocks. He didn't draw in the pyramid, by the way. Still, the geometrical add-in should give you a sense of what pyramidal composition means. Grisaille is a form of painting executed entirely, a term for painting executed entirely in monochrome or near monochrome, and usually in shades of gray. It's a technique that's often used to depict or imitate statuary. So here's an example from a painting of the Annunciation by Jan van Eyck, the fellow who painted the Arnolfini marriage, which you saw in your summer assignments. And here's an entire Annunciation panel also by Van Eyck, and you can see the contrast between Grisaille and multi-chromatic oil painting. So what do you think the right answer is? It's B. Look at that very dark background contrasted with the spotlight on all that blood and gore. This is what Caravaggio is especially famous for. But here's why I don't think this question is entirely fair. This is a Tenebris painting, in fact, by Caravaggio. It's his famous painting of St. Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus. You can surely identify the Tena Prism, at least I hope so. But isn't there also a kind of pyramid with Paul's outstretched hands forming a base? In fact, and this is the reason why I think it's a little bit confusing, pyramidal composition is typical of Baroque painters and sculptors, and Artemisia Gentileschi is one of those. I would also say that this painting is at least somewhat pyramidal. Anyway, the lesson here is probably that you shouldn't overthink a question. Tena Prism is the better answer since it's much more closely associated with Caravaggio and because this painting is unquestionably an example of Tena Prism. Trust me, by May, this would be an easy question for you. Here's a College Board sample series of questions. I hope you all recognize this work from your summer assignment. But do you remember the rather weird title of this work? It's Shibboleth. Now, I was struck when I reread the Khan Academy essay this week that it states how important the title is to understanding the work, but doesn't go on to tell the story behind the title. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, the term shibboleth now usually means, quote, a word or way of speaking or behaving which shows that a person belongs to a particular group. That's actually the secondary meaning. The primary meaning listed by the dictionary is, quote, an old idea, opinion, or saying that is commonly believed and repeated, but may be seen as old-fashioned or untrue. My guess is that the artist intended to convey both messages, the way words or pronunciations separate people and that prejudices arising from this separation are old-fashioned and misleading and untrue. But the origin of the term comes from another Bible story, this time from Judges chapter 12, verses 5 and 6. The Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan leading to Ephraim, and when a survivor of Ephraim said, "Let me cross over," the men of Gilead asked him, "Are you an Ephraimite?" If he replied no, they said, "All right, say Shibboleth." If he said Sibboleth, because he could not pronounce the word correctly, the Gilead seized him and killed him. 42,000 Ephraimites were killed at that time. This nasty form of ethnic cleansing worked because the Ephraimite dialect did not contain the sh sound. And by the way, there are other examples throughout history. American soldiers during World War II, for example, would ask captured prisoners who claimed to be Americans to say Lollapalooza, of all things. Any rate, Shibboleth is, as the story should make pretty clear, an ethnic classification. It's a way of telling people apart. The Bible story isn't really a prophecy, it's a narrative, although again, I think that's a little tricky. Shibboleth was not a racist epithet like the word nigger. Actually, the word simply means stream in Hebrew. Still, I think this is a pretty tough question with some misleadingly close possible answers. And by the way, that's quite deliberate. Often when you see a multiple choice question, two answers will be quite clearly wrong, but one will be alarmingly close. And that's where you start to really need to know what you're doing. Okay, this question's easier. Once you cut through all the words in the preface, challenging institutional authority, etc., and as I'm about to say, I think they're a little misleading, really what the College Board is asking you is, where is this work found? Where is it located? It was installed in the Tate Modern, which is an art museum in London. So, this work of art is a crack cut into the floor of a museum. Why do I think that this question, too, is just a little sneaky? Well, when you think of challenges to institutional authority, you, or at least I, am more likely to think of challenging government agencies. Sure, it's a little weird for a museum to let an artist cut a crack through its floor, but museums do weird things all the time. So in some ways, this third question is the easiest question of all, if you remember what you learned about the work. The Khan Academy essay that you were assigned clearly quoted the artist as saying that she was commenting on the difficult position facing immigrants, especially immigrants in Europe, and she herself is from Colombia in South America. The crack is the gap between insiders and outsiders, those who clearly belong and those who are feared as outsiders. That's the meaning, or the presumed meaning, of the work. Could you figure this out just by looking at the image? I don't think so. Shibboleth could easily, again, if you don't know the word, be a word that captures how climate change causes earthquakes, or how loss of innocence separates childhood from adulthood, or how our skin cracks and wrinkles as we age. What this question set should persuade you is that you must learn the assigned images. And sorry for our class, that includes the extra images that Ms. Jacobs and I have added to the list. They may not be on the AP test, although you see from the Gentileschi example that they might show up, but they will be on your unit tests. For what it's worth, our separate list includes a lot of very famous works that our fellow art history teachers have been complaining about being left off the College Board list. Many of these are works that an educated student of art, in our view at least, truly must know. So live with it and with us, okay? So here's an example of one of the two 30-minute essays. The College Board actually lists 3 possible works that you could use to answer that question. I didn't include that list on the slide because I don't think you'll know those works yet. Stay tuned. But can you think of a work that we talked about in today's class on context and works depicting Judith and Holofernes that you might use to answer this question? Well, how about Donatello's statue of Judith and Holofernes? It's not directly about the history of Florence, but it was very clearly meant to be a metaphor for the challenges facing Florence, a small republic under constant attack from bigger empires, especially France and the Holy Roman Empire. Think about the way the leader of the Florentine Republic, the fellow who commissioned the work, Cosimo de' Medici, wanted to remind the people of Florence that they needed to protect their liberty against foreign bullies. And then there's the added interesting fact that it was later placed in front of the town hall to remind the citizens of Florence how smart they'd been to get rid of the increasingly tyrannical Medici. Note again that scary term, completely identified. The College Board would like you to give title, artist, date, and materials or media, in this case, bronze. But you can get full points if you can give 2 identifiers. By the way, if you select one of the titles that the College Board suggests as a possible work, then you have to come up with 2 additional identifiers. This is one of many reasons why you may want to use your own work to answer these questions. Another reason is that the AP graders are going to get tired of reading a lot of essays on the works that are listed, and it's always good to keep their interest. So here is a short essay and an example of an attribution question. One of the objectives in this course is that you are able to recognize an unknown work as the work of an artist that you do know. You're able to attribute it. The College Board did not actually use this particular painting in the question. You probably wouldn't recognize the work they chose yet. So I substituted a painting that I thought you might be able to attribute to a specific artist, at least if you did your summer assignments. So, who would you guess painted this work, and why? Why would you make that guess? Well, you should recognize the similarity to Starry Night, especially the cypress trees. I'm not going to take time to review a full answer to this question. You might think about it yourself, but you probably have an idea of at least some points you'd want to make. Notice the swirling line, again, the cypress trees, the sky, but I said I wasn't going to try to answer it. Any rate, that's more than enough for now. I promise we won't send you into the exam room in May unprepared for what you're going to see when you open the test booklet. Whether you are prepared to answer the questions you see, in the end, is going to depend at least as much on your thought and effort as it does on our teaching skill. But don't panic. By May, you will be amazed at the places you've been, the art you've seen, and by how much you now actually know. We've taught this class in the past, and students always say this as they go into the exam. When they finish their review, I couldn't believe how much art I knew. Then, of course, they encounter questions they can't answer. You will. Life is like that. You can still do very well. So, hang in there. Do your assignments. Pay attention and contribute in class. Use your eyes, use your brain cells, and please, learn to appreciate the extraordinary artistic heritage that each of us has as a member of the human race. In the end, Ms. Jacobs and I care a whole lot more about starting you off on a lifelong love affair with art than we do about the score you get on the AP test. By the end of the year, we think you'll feel the same way.